I also am a fan of the term lumpage. I think that should be brought into the scientific
Sure.
lexicon. Welcome to Winging It with Frank and Sammy, coming to you from a rainy day all throughout California. I am Sammy, and this is my co-host Frank. Frank, are you staying dry today?
With mixed results. I have soaked through a lot of shoes in the past couple of days, so yes and no. How about you?
Well, we currently have a leak in the roof, actually. Um, yeah, so it's not too bad currently, but hopefully it doesn't get worse.
Yeah. Good luck.
Thanks. Thanks. But anyways, we're not here to talk about rainy weather. We're here to talk about birds, and specifically we're going to dive into the weedy world of bird taxonomy. Frank, are you ready for this?
I'm as ready as I'm gonna be. I don't really do too well with the scientific papers and the jargon, but I'm gonna buckle down and see what we can get out of this here.
Yeah, so just to be clear, neither Frank or I are taxonomists. We do not professionally study phylogenetics and all those things. But we're just going to try to explain why sometimes these species seem to pop up out of nowhere, or one species is now two species, or two species are now one species, so on and so forth. So, Frank, where do you want to start for us today?
Oh man, I think we should start with how this happens, right? Like who out there is deciding, okay, this bird is now two different species. Like what's the process like? Who is making the decisions? We just know it hits eBird. We get news articles about it, and all of a sudden things when we try to report lists are different, right? So what's the process? How does it come to pass?
Yeah, so recently, the recent splits that are concerned most North American birders are the Warbling Vireo was split into two different species, Western Warbling Vireo and Eastern Warbling Vireo. So that is decided by the North American Classification Committee, so NACC, of the American Ornithological Society, the AOS. So every year, basically, they get together, and I believe it's, between 10 and 12 voting members, and usually they review scientific papers and literature out there, and then they vote to split a species that basically says, okay, we think these two species that used to be considered one are now actually two different species, or they may lump a species, and both have happened in recent years. And these happen so much, we're not gonna cover every single
Right.
split and lump there's ever been. But that's kind of the background of how it happens. So, and actually, Frank and I were looking at this graph beforehand, and maybe we can just share the screen here. We can kind of show you guys. This is from AOS. It's appropriately titled Lumpers and Splitters. So, we have an article
Which
here
are
from the
you?
American Ornithological Society. This is from 2018 by Bob Montgomery. And you can, I'll put this article in the show notes, but what I want to draw everyone's attention to is this interesting graph. So, Frank, for those who are listening to the podcast audio version, can you describe what we are seeing here?
Yeah, sure. So it's a graph of the basically cumulative number of lumps that they've done versus the number of splits. And this started, it looks like, in the late 1800s, and they went crazy with the lumps. Like they started lumping everything together. If it could breed, then they lumped it together. And it seems like later, in the mid 1900s, we kind of start to pull back on the lumpage and we lean a little bit more into the split
Pull back on
as
the
kind of
lumpage.
the DNA science comes along and we start to realize that, okay, these are not actually the same birds. They look similar. In some cases, they don't even look similar. But what you kind of have is a lot of lumps that go through a process of getting split again. And it's really kind of funny to me because I've always heard about like the Northern Oriole. Like that was, I think, in 73 that happened. And that was a lump that got split in the 90s. And that was like around the time that I started birding. So I saw Baltimore Orioles when they were very newly reborn as Baltimore Orioles again. So, but the
Mm.
Baltimore Oriole, the Bullocks Oriole, I don't know how they were ever. I guess there was some hybridization, and they lump them together. But those birds don't look anything alike. They don't really sound anything alike. Like that's a stretch for me. Like the warbling vireos look almost identical to me. So I think that one makes a lot of sense. Like I could see how that's one species. For me, it's so much the eye test, and I hate that the science is like, no, you're sorry, it looks the same, but it's thanks.
Yeah. So it's interesting on this graph, like you mentioned, the number of splits. I also am a fan of the term lumpage. I think that should be brought into the scientific lexicon.
Sure.
There was a
I like
lot
it.
of lumpage going on in the early 1900s, but yeah, it looks kind of like from 1980 onwards, the number of splits seems to kind of take off. And the article does mention this is really where genetic tools come into play, and you can actually sequence DNA from blood, from feathers, and actually compare how closely species are related. Because beforehand, like we didn't have that. We just looked, oh yeah, those birds look similar. Yeah, this is where we're getting into some what we call a biological species concept. So if lumps and splits are confusing to people, just understand that we don't even really have a solid 100% definition of what a species is.
Nope.
So
So best effort to interpret life, basically. We do what we can, but there isn't even like I was researching this while you were looking at the charts. There isn't like a set difference in shared DNA that defines the difference between like a species or a family or something like that. It's just kind of a lot of vibes going on there. So what else was in this update?
I don't think this one was too. Oh, actually, no. It was either this one or I can't remember. So Cooper's hawks and sharp-shinned hawks, two birds that were pretty challenging ID. They look very similar to each other. Sharpshins are essentially a smaller version of Coopers, and they were both considered accipiters, type of hawk, and that are usually aerial ambush predators. So they're going for small songbirds, doves, small mammals. But now they're not even in the same genus as each other. And again, if you have no sort of like taxonomy background, basically understand that genus is the penultimate or kind of, second closest or smallest level we have then before species. We have subspecies, but they're like not quite a full category. So you have species and then genus. So a classic example, Panthero leo, that is your lion, African lion, and then Panthero tigris is your tiger. So they're both big cats. They're both in that Panthera genus or Panthero. I can't remember exactly which one. But so they're like kind of like sister species to each other.
So you're saying the difference between lions and tigers is now equivalent to the difference between a Cooper's hawk and a sharp-shinned hawk?
They made it more different. So they're not in
Hmm.
the same genus anymore.
That's crazy. See, as somebody who relies like so much on the visual and seeing the bird and hearing the bird and stuff, to have two birds that look so incredibly similar be like on that level of difference is very frustrating to me. Like the downy and the hairy woodpecker, like you think of them as like close relatives because they're just like slightly different sizes. And no, it's like no, they're like third removed cousins, like don't even really know each other or anything. How does that happen?
Yeah, so yeah, Downey and Harry. I think Harry's closest relative, I believe, is white-headed or Arizona. I think those are in the same Leconoptopicus, if I am pronouncing that correctly. And I think Harry and white-headed are the other six species: red cockaded, smoky brown, okay, Arizona, Strickland's, which is down in Mexico, Harry, white-headed. Those are the six species in Leucanotopicus. And then for the downy woodpecker, they're in Dryobates, and that's Nuttall's woodpecker. So Nuttall's and downy more closely related. And ladderback, that makes sense. Lesser spotted woodpecker, which is in Asia, and then crimson-naped and necklace woodpecker, which are also in Asia. Or
What's the
you also know
biological
that
term?
greater yellowlegs and lesser yellowlegs aren't the sister species to each other?
Same thing. It's literally just every bird that's a smaller version of the exact same bird is a completely different bird. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, it's the greater yellow legs and the willet are more closely related.
So there's a term for that in biology, right? Where it's like
Hmm.
different species take the same path and end up looking similar and behaving similar, even though they're not related.
Yeah, convergent evolution.
Convergent evolution. So that appears to be pretty rampant now that we have more DNA evidence with birds.
Yes, and so the hypothesis that I have heard for, like, for example, the downy and the hairy is that since downies are smaller, they evolved to look like hairies since they do coexist in a lot of the same habitats. And that way, the hairies, maybe from a distance, might see a hairy looking woodpecker instead of recognizing, like, oh, there's a stupid little downy that can go beat up. It's the hairy woodpecker sees, oh, there's another downy. I'd rather not risk a fight.
Wow. Okay.
And then actually, this actually was brought up in the movie The Residents, which you reviewed on your other podcast.
That's true.
It was the
So it
meadowlark,
was
and it was
like the horn claw or something, some African bird that looks
the
just like a
long claw. That's
long
right.
claw. That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't seen that in a while, but yeah, I remember it was like they were testing, she was testing somebody, like, do you know the difference between these two birds or something?
Yes. So it was the yellow-throated long claw
That's it.
and the eastern meadowlark. She showed up. She showed someone in the show two pictures, one of the long claw and one of the meadowlark, and asked him if he were the same bird, and he said, "Yeah, sure, of course they are." And she was like, "Wrong,"
Yeah. Yeah. We
because
would
the long claw occurs in sub-Saharan Africa, and like the meadowlark, they are grassland species, and so they do and they have evolved very. It's very striking. Like they look, at least in a like coloration, they look very similar in posture and kind of structure. You can tell the difference.
mhm.
But two birds, they're nowhere closely related to each other on different sides of the world, but they are actually very similar in appearance, at least.
No danger of them being lumped anytime soon.
I don't think so.
Congrats.
But yeah, I think one thing I also want to mention. So another article we were reading, kind of looking at this, was if you live in the eastern United States, you're probably familiar with the hybrids between blue-winged and golden-winged warblers. So you have Brewster's warblers, Lawrence's warblers. Those are hybrids from those two species, and these two species do seem to readily hybridize throughout their range. And this article we read was saying, what was the number? Their DNA is 99.97% the same, essentially. And so, yeah, it was basically as when researchers sequenced the DNA, they only found like 6 major regions of difference that controlled, throat color and body color. And those are the changes that kind of result in this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing that 0.03% and they're still separate species. And that's what we were kind of talking about. Like, is there a limit? Like, at what point do you just have to say it's the same species? But apparently, no, there is none. So, and they obviously hybridize, but you were looking it up. The hybrids don't reproduce with each other. They only reproduce with the original blue-winged or golden-winged
Oh, so actually, no,
species.
sorry. I know they do reproduce with each other as well. So I thought that they didn't, and maybe that's why they were considered separate species. But I think it was really just that they seem to be distinct enough and kind of maintain their distinctness, even though the hybrids will, because that's kind of one thing of like a donkey and a horse, right? They can hybridize and produce mules, but we still consider them
Right.
separate species because mules are sterile; they can't reproduce. So
Hmm.
then it's like, oh, but now we have a hybrid that can reproduce. Really, is it the same species? But the one paper I was reading was saying essentially they maintain their differences enough. And also, there is a mitochondrial DNA difference that is pretty
Right.
high.
So that probably doesn't get factored into the 99.97% similarity. I would imagine the mitochondrial DNA is compared separately outside of
I
the
think so. Yeah,
species DNA.
mitochondrial DNA is is inherited differently. So I guess apparently in the case of the warblers, they had 3 to 5% difference in their mitochondrial DNA, and that was different enough to consider them separate species, even though their main DNA, if you want to call it that, is 99.97% the same.
It's mind blowing. I just like, all right, I guess to get back to birds.
Yeah, no, we've, but that's kind of part of it, right? To understand this, you got to really get into the science.
You do. If you really want to know why they did this, but then sometimes it gets controversial, right? And they have to have this vote, and it's like you need 2/3 of the vote, 75% of the vote to approve these things.
I think 75%, yeah.
It's never like a complete universal vote. Like there's always a dissenting thing, it seems like. So even when you have all the DNA evidence and all this stuff, some people still think it shouldn't be split or should be split. Kind of crazy. It seems like there's a whole thing going on behind the curtain that we're not aware of. These big discussions about, is this going to be its own species or not? Like that's a lot of power to wield, really.
Yeah, you know,
Cool.
yeah, I think we were reading, it said 75%, and that I think it was the vote was like 6-5 in favor, but that didn't get that super majority for what was it, the willets, to split them into western and eastern willet.
Yeah.
But they, I think some hesitation was that some of the members thought the sample sizes were too small or needed maybe some more evidence. And so, that's what people are researching. They're, and as more evidence comes to light or more consistent evidence of like over time, like, you're consistently finding these differences across large populations, then it'll probably get split in the future if I had to bet on
Just
it.
like I think the nuthatches at some point, yellow-rumped warblers, maybe they keep trying, but it doesn't stick. There's a bunch though, and it's every year they review a few of them. So what about juncos? Like it drives me a little nuts that you have all these juncos with these vastly different color patterns and everything, but they're all still the same dark-eyed junco, like different subspecies, I guess, like pink-sided and Oregon, slate colored and everything. I don't know that I've heard that ever being rumored as like one that would get split. I haven't researched it, but have you heard about the juncos ever possibly getting split? Do they hybridize?
No, because it's pretty common for juncos to like different subspecies to pair up. There's enough gene flow between the different populations that they are considered, the same species. But and that's where you get a lot of different things with some species that are maybe pretty isolated from each other. And if they look similar, but maybe this one species only breeds on this one island, then that can cause their genetics to be like, oh no, they're pretty.
The island scrub jay, right? All those endemic species that just sit out on the islands and don't come to the mainland anymore, eventually get to be their own species. Good for them.
Yeah, and then you have species that like to anybody would clearly look like different species. We talked about the Orioles, but then also wasn't it a couple years ago you guys in Ventura? I think before I came down, there was a scissor-tailed and western kingbird hybrid.
Hybrid, yep. We have the nest.
Yeah. Who took the nest?
It's at the Western Foundation building.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Again, if you've ever seen a scissor-tailed and western kingbird, they look very different, but they're pretty closely related enough to hybridize. And then there's actually up in Northern California here, there's a red-shouldered hawk and a common black hawk pair that is,
That's a weird one.
Yeah, so there was a hybrid spotted a couple years ago, and then then there was a pair nesting. They call it the desperation hypothesis. Basically, if you have a bird that's out of its range, and it's just like, I'll just take anybody.
Yeah, wow. Okay, and that worked. Yeah, I know. I mean, like the gulls are infamous for hybrids, right? There's just that's why they're so difficult to identify in the first place, and then to try and like put them into different species when there's just like rampant hybridization going on. I don't envy the people making decisions on those groups of birds. And I know the hummingbirds, like Anna's and Costas, apparently hybridize fairly often, which would be a nightmare to identify. But okay, I would love to see one anyway.
I saw one in my yard in Moore Park one time a couple years ago. See if I still have that picture. But it was like, oh, it was like right in between. It was like this throat is kind of purpley, but it doesn't have the full, kind of flared gorget that the
Hmm.
Costas would do. Like you definitely could tell like this is kind of like an in betweener.
Yeah. I had a, well, now we're talking about hybrids. So I had a hybrid Myrtle and Audubon's yellow rump warbler over at the ponds one time, and it was there for a couple of years. And it was just always a fascinating bird that like looked like one and sounded like the other and had like traits of both in the face. And I was like, this is kind of a cool little guy. I like it. I miss that bird.
Yeah. When you start to get really familiar with birds, and then you can start to see, ducks hybridize a fair amount too.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see like, oh, this looks like some sort of both. That's weird.
Yeah. I actually had a mystery hybrid duck over at the ponds the other day. It's like a mallard cinnamon teal is what I'm guessing, just based on it's like that warm brown tone, slightly smaller
Ah,
than a mallard, but has that like the cinnamon teal bill, but like way bigger than a teal. So it's kind of just a funky looking bird. Like, okay, I'll take a picture of that. That's weird. Hunting for hybrids. It's fun.
yeah, yeah. And then you have the vireos, which look essentially identical to each other.
Right.
And
Somebody find me an Eastern Western Warbling Vireo hybrid.
I don't even know how you would tell.
All right, come on. Ugh.
It probably would sound, I guess, sound like one and maybe look more like the other one, because they
Yeah,
do
probably.
sound, and that's the case with like flycatchers, empids, for example. They all look very similar, but they have pretty distinct voices, which can help. So, and I know
Mhm.
that's the case with the vireos as well.
There's hope then. You can only identify them in the spring.
Yeah,
Just
just
fine.
wait for them to sing. Yeah, I mean, we're not experts at all the different splits and lumps and all the, but it's trying to give people a general overview of why this stuff happens. Any other topics we should address here for Frank, or for the people, Frank?
For me, I'm good. No, I think we covered it pretty good. I mean, we talked about where it comes from. We talked about the group that decides and what they're looking for to make those decisions. We got some good examples of birds that have been recently split and lumped. Birds we're hoping get split or maybe lumped. I don't know. If all the gulls were one gull, I'd be okay with that. But that's
All
probably
the
just
goals were one goal.
maybe like
That is
four
a
or
goal.
five gulls. The ones that I can identify are good. Everything else is just seagull. Let's bring out seagull and see how the birding world
Mm.
reacts to that. That's my hot
Oh
take.
yeah, I like that hot take. Well, it would make the goal guidebook, which I'm currently reading, obsolete. So I'm sure the author of
Yeah,
that would
dude.
not like it.
It'd be a one pager.
I like it. Birding hot takes here.
Sure. No, I think we did pretty good. Pat ourselves on the back a little.
Yeah, yeah. So wait, yeah. I'll try to put some links to the different articles in the YouTube and the podcast description. But that's our episode for today. Yeah, if you have any questions, let us know. And otherwise, we'll see you guys in the next one.